Right, I think we are live. Hello and welcome to Resd Digital, the online version of EGX Resd, where we are taking a closer look at some of the great new indie games that are coming out later this year. I'm Katharine Castle from Rock Paper Shotgun, and I'm joined by Mimimi Games' Moritz Wagner, who is head of design for the upcoming Wild West real-time tactics game, Desperados III. Hello.
Hi.
So apologies in advance for people watching on YouTube if there are any sort of technical hitches. This is all quite new for us, so please bear with us if anything goes wrong or the image looks a bit funny. There will be time at the end for you guys to ask your questions to Mo, so please do put them in YouTube chat, and we'll go through them at the end. So Mo, let's sort of set the scene a little. Sort of back in 2016, Mimimi released the critically acclaimed Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Shogun, which saw you play as 5 elite ninjas in Edo period Japan, so sneaking past guards and doing a lot of murdering.
Yes.
Now you're bringing that same flavor of real-time tactics to the world of Desperados III in the Wild West. Sort of, it's been quite a number of years since we last saw a Desperados game. Like, for those who maybe aren't familiar with the series, like, what do you think are the core ingredients of a great Desperados game?
So I think of course, it's the core is the real-time tactics core that like Commandos, Desperados, and Shadow Tactics all share. So it's tactical stealth gameplay where you have to be very careful and a lot of iteration while playing. So there's a lot of quick saving and quick loading going on, and the game is built around that. So it's not, you don't have to feel bad if you're safe scamming all the time. But what makes Desperados unique is also the story. It has a bigger focus on story and narrative. It used to always have very cutscenes a lot and all that stuff that was not that present in Commandos. So this is sort of what set it apart, aside from the setting in being in a Western.
Yeah, sort of obviously like that, just as we mentioned just a moment ago, sort of your last game, it was set in like Edo period Japan, where ninjas, I would say, are quite a good fit for kind of stealthy real-time tactics. This, on the other hand, is the Wild West, and I guess kind of like one obvious question is kind of how do you build a stealthy tactics game in a period that's largely defined by very noisy guns?
That is a problem. Like the fun thing is that one of the main ideas behind the pitch for Shadow Tactics actually was that we said, okay, so we're going to take this stealth real-time tactics thing that has always been in settings that involve shooting, like World War II and put it in something that makes sense with ninjas. And now we're working on Desperados. But it does work out. Like what we had to do is basically look at what the gun gameplay was like in the old Desperados and Commandos games. Look like what we had in Shadow Tactics, which was very bare bones, like guns did not do much there. And it was clear that we couldn't do that for Desperados because it's a Western. So people should have the ability to use guns and have fun with them. And so we put a lot of effort in that. And what it basically came down to was giving each character a very unique sort of gun skill that they have. For example, one of them has a sniper type skill. We already had that in different iterations, of course, but we have a shotgun that has a big like cone of death that sprays everyone away. There's one guy, Cooper, the main character, who can use 2 revolvers at the same time, basically, to take down 2 guards at the same time. And then we have Kate, who has sort of a stealthy gun that she can use secretly. And we put all these ingredients together to create something that's more diverse when you like give you choice with the guns. And then a very, very, very big thing that we did is, like in the old games, like in the old Desperados and Commandos games, if you would start a gunfight, and that would happen frequently. I mean, I was young when they came out, so I was basically always shooting 2 minutes in because it was too hard for me. And I was just standing behind a corner and shooting everyone who came around the corner. And we did not want that to happen. So we are balancing it a bit with ammunition. So there's a lot of cooldowns and ammunitions going on. So you can't just go in guns blazing. You still have to be tactical and have to think while you're doing that. And that is the most important focus for us, was to like have the same type of thinking that is required in our stealth in the gun gameplay.
Yeah. And kind of obviously like the setting itself is quite the sea change from kind of like, kind of medieval Japan. Like what was it like going from that period to kind of like to the Wild West in terms of like just how you designed like the levels and things like that?
So what we do in the beginning is we usually look at what are these iconic settings or things that we feel are important in a setting. For a Wild West setting, there's probably going to be a mine, like a train robbery, like these sort of things where yeah, of course, that's Western. For the Edo period, it was like, okay, we want to have a monastery of some kind, even though that probably is not that Japanese per se, but we want to have these pagoda style buildings and a Japanese village and these sort of things. So we approach it from that. What are the marquee settings that we want to do? And then what also changed a lot is like Shadow Tactics, we had to make our own, like how serious is the world, what is going on. But for Desperados, that already existed. It's sort of a Western type of world, not in the historical sense, but in the movie sense. So while it should be realistic, and we're always looking at what was actually there, sometimes you put that romantic thing on it where you say, okay, this is what people want a Western to be, even though it might not have been like that in the real time. So we had a lot of that. But on the other hand, we really upped the realism in the graphics. Like it looks a lot more realistic than Shadow Tactics does. It's which made it a lot harder as well to do, because there's a lot more going on.
Yeah. And kind of, did you need to kind of, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in kind of capturing the spirit of the era? Like, was there a particular, as you say, you know, you sort of have that kind of, you have to weigh up that kind of romantic idea of the Wild West with the kind of historical one. Like, how did you tackle that?
So what we like instantly knew that it was going to be a romantic Western, but even there's a lot of differences in the genre of Western itself. Like we have these like old school Italo Westerns, like the John Wayne things, not the John Wayne things, but the Clint Eastwood and all that. And then we have the John Wayne Westerns, but are very over the top, like and more fun in a way, and not that serious. And then we have the modern type of Western, like True Grit maybe, or The Revenant or something, that are mostly about man versus nature and not so much about these other things. So we looked at this a lot and these settings and tried to piece them together in a way that we liked. And for us, it was, we did not want to go the man versus nature route, because we're not a survival game, we're a stealth game. So you're facing guys and not animals. So that was a rather easy decision, and also plays in with the visuals. But regarding the visuals, you would sometimes say, okay, we want it to look like this mission should maybe look like True Grit would have looked, or The Revenant. But the tone we have in there is usually more between an Italo Western and a John Wayne Western. Like you're killing hundreds of guys, but it's all in good spirit, right? It's not like when John Wayne shoots someone, it's not an evil thing that's happening. It's just fun. That sounds weird, but that's what it's like for us in these Westerns. And that's how we want it to be. You shouldn't feel bad when you're playing our game.
Yeah, I mean, what's there? You know, as you were saying earlier, you know, as when I think of a Western, you know, as you say, there's like, you think of the big train robberies, the horse chases, the gold mines, all that sort of stuff. Like, was there anything when you kind of first sat down to design the game? Like, was there anything like we've definitely got to have like one of those in this game? Like, it wouldn't be, you know, a Desperados game or even like a Western game like without it.
Yeah, so the train robbery is the first one that came to mind regarding that. The thing is, I cannot spoil like all the missions we have. There are a couple in there that we haven't shown yet, where I can say, okay, these would be that type of thing. But the train robbery is rather interesting in itself, because it was rather hard to do for us. Like we went, it's the first big mission in the game, so it gets a lot of iteration and work to get it right. And in the beginning, it was set along the train, but at some point you would like diverge into this open field, and we realized, okay, that's a cool mission, but where's the train? Like I'm not walking along the train anymore. So we had to redesign it quite a bit and a few times to get it like to this, it's following the train. And we were thinking a lot about like, how does it feel like the train just stopped and all that type of stuff. So there went a lot in that. And then something that we have like put in as well, that some Westerns have, but not too many, is the whole Louisiana voodoo swamp vibe that we have in our second chapter. And that was something that we put a lot of work into. Like you're in New Orleans at some point, and we wanted to get that, like make it a very cool, unique level. And that has a very different vibe. And then in chapter 3, we're in the old school Western. So we basically went backwards if you go time-wise. Like the modern Western is usually in something like Colorado with snow often, and these type of, this is our first chapter. And then we go in the second chapter, we do a unique thing. And the third chapter is where we go classically Italo Western, New Mexico, canyons vibes. So we're going backwards, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering, like, how do you kind of put your own sort of stamp on those classic tropes? Because it's sort of like, especially, you know, when you are adapting them to like a real-time tactics environment where, you know, sort of maybe previous Western games, you know, it's all about the kind of, you know, the heat of the moment action and kind of the fast gunplay, and it's like how do you adapt those to work in a real-time tactics kind of setting?
Well, it's tough. I think like the most important thing for us is we create atmosphere a lot through the banter of our characters and sort of
Mm,
the thing that enemies say on the map. And we have like, if you compare that to Shadow Tactics, it's insane. I don't know the comparison of amount of lines that we have in the script, but it's
mm,
so much more. There's
yeah.
so much more dialogue going on and such funny things that the guards are talking about on the maps. So this
Mm,
is a big part where we can give you that Western vibe
yeah.
even just by being there, basically. And the cool
Yeah.
thing in our game is you can scroll over the map and you can see all these things and you can hear them at all times because we don't have
Mm,
like a fog of war or anything. So you can
yeah.
always open the mission up and scroll to some point and you hear somebody talking about that bull riding guy over there, or you like, or
Mm,
the church bell, and sometimes you might get information from that, like you can drop that church bell to somebody's head,
yeah.
or it's sometimes it's just flavor or it's something that
Mm,
foreshadows the new levels. So this is how we create a lot of that flavor. And then in the gameplay, of course, it's the guns that we talked about already,
yeah.
which add a lot there. And yeah, so we're balancing that and we're trying to work a lot on that. And I think we
Mm,
nailed it very well from my
yeah.
perspective. Of course, that's to be seen by everybody who plays it here. But I
Yeah.
think we did a good job there. And
Mm,
the gameplay is still stealth focused if you're not using guns. And
yeah.
that still works for me inside
Mm,
the setting.
yeah. Obviously, sort of John Cooper is back as the kind of the main character, but he's, you know, he's joined by quite a lot of returning characters from the series as well. Sort of like, tell us about how some of the other characters, like how they'll be working together with Cooper, and you know how their skills work together.
Yeah, so it is a prequel, which we did deliberately because the old first Desperados is like 15 years old or something, or even
Yeah.
more. So
Yeah.
people might not remember what happened in the story back then.
Mm,
And so we said, okay, we're going to do a prequel, so you can get the origin story and you don't need to know much. But if you know things, you might get
mm,
a little nugget of Easter egg or something where you're like,
yeah.
I remember that. So you're starting off with John Cooper, and he's meeting two
Mm,
characters from the old games, which is Kate O'Hara and Doc McCoy.
yeah.
They're the two, McCoy basically being the sniper, sleazy rogue guy, and
Mm,
Kate being like a social manipulator. She's very good with social skills and distracting guards and all that.
mm,
And sort of a spy type of archetype. And then we added like two new characters in that are Hector, who's like the big brutish guy with a trap
mm,
and an axe and a shotgun. He's
mhm.
very straightforward archetype. And then we have the newest addition, which is Isabelle Moreau. She's a voodoo priestess.
Mm,
Well, not really priestess, but she is from the bayous in
mm,
Louisiana, and she has sort of that Caribbean background where she has this voodoo connection that she's learned, and she uses very interesting skills. We've shown
yeah.
that in some kind of trailer before and all that,
Mm,
but yeah, that is sort of the lineup that we have. And the important thing is that you don't have all the characters in every mission. We tell you which
mm,
characters you have in which mission, which
right.
is very important. So the game stays fun. So you have to
Yeah.
rethink. You cannot get used to always having John
Mm,
Cooper and his cool throwing knife. And at some
yeah.
point, he's not in the mission, and then you have to adapt. So
Yeah.
that's very important. And what we put a lot of emphasis on basically with these characters is that they are very unique. Like they all have, of course, have some sort of melee takedown skills,
Mm,
though those vary as well. So we have people who are very fast at that, like Hector
mm,
and the big axe. That's a quick thing. He takes an enemy down very quickly because he's very strong. Isabelle, for example, she has a blowpipe. She uses darts to
mhm,
like poison the people, and she uses that blowpipe in melee, and that is a slow thing. So it takes quite a few seconds because when she wants to take someone down, so you have to take that into account.
mm,
And they're all very like specialists type of very unique characters.
yeah. And kind of there are of the characters who are kind of returning. Um, you know, how did you decide kind of which of their kind of classic skills to keep? Like, or did you kind of want to, you know, kind of put your own sort of stamp on them?
So what we did was we looked at what the essence of the character was for us. For
Mm,
example, for Kate, it's the social aspect, and for Doc, it's the sniper,
yeah.
and for Cooper, it's his throwing knife, which is very simple, but that's what he's like. Throwing knife and being a gunslinger is what he's about. So we took that and then we looked at what we learned about making a game in this genre already, because in these old games, some of the skills, they don't work as well. Like today, you would say that they are sort of useless, maybe. They're not as strong as other skills, and it's very important to us that they're balanced throughout the board.
Yeah.
So we adjusted things, but for example, the way Doc works, we have changed some of his skills. He still uses poison vials and gas vials that he used in the old game, but they work very differently because they're very hard to use. Like, if you remember in the old game, you had to put them on a balloon, and then you had the balloon running up, and you had to hope that the wind is in the correct direction. So it was very clunky, and it was very cool if you made it work, but it was hard to get it to work. And now he can just throw a poison vial, which is very it's powerful as well. And he has poison in his other distraction, which is sort of a back thing. It's a weird thing. So the essence is the same, but we try to balance the characters out and make you feel, okay, yeah, this is stock. And the feedback we've gotten goes into that direction. Like everybody is like, yeah, they play exactly like in the old games, even though things changed. But you're right.
I sort of, I think you showed off kind of Isabelles Powers at Gamescom last year, and sort of her kind of mind controlling powers. They reminded me quite a lot of Emily's domino power in Dishonored 2. Like it's quite a playful kind of power to have with a character. Like, are you trying to in giving players sort of some slightly more kind of like kind of tapping into that kind of voodoo kind of nature? Like, are you encouraging players to kind of experiment more with these new abilities?
Definitely. Yeah, that was the main goal with Isabelle and the whole game as well. Like, we realized that what we do is we build these enemy setups that are very intricate. Like, we put enemies in the view cones, and it's very iterative process where we need to make sure that it works well. But we realize very quickly that our skills, they're so powerful that we cannot foresee everything the player does. Like, you can solve these with all the skills if you just use them clever enough. And some of these uses might be very like pro-like, so you don't get that in the beginning. And if you play it again, you're like, hey, I can combine this with that. And so that was a baseline for everything that we realized is the strength of our game. That's why it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And so we thought, okay, if you're going to make a new character, we want to make one that taps into that perfectly. And that is basically where Isabelle came from, and her like mind control and connect abilities, which are like, they're a big sandbox. You can connect almost any living being in the game to another living being, and then you can have the effect of the one transfer to the other and see what happens. And there's some crazy stuff that's possible there. Like, just an example, you can like knock one guy out, connect him with someone else, and then throw the guy into the water, and he'll drown, and the other guy will drown as well.
Right. Yeah.
Or you can like connect the chicken with someone, or you can mind control the chicken. Like, there's a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah, and kind of obviously, like, I guess part of the challenge is like with abilities that are that powerful. Like, how do you kind of make sure that there's still enough challenge for the player?
So that is something we need to like adjust in the balancing of the skills, of course. So we have like the mind control, which is extremely powerful, has ammunition. Right. You can't just spam mind control on everyone, because if we didn't balance it, like in the beginning, we tried a lot with a mind control that she could use all the time. We had that for quite some time, but we just couldn't get it to feel right, because what is the most important thing for us here is that it should never sound the alarm. Like, if you're mind controlling someone, it should always be like the guards suspecting each other and never you. So there should not be an alarm. And that makes it very powerful. So we balance that using ammunition. And then, of course, we have to do a lot of balancing in the level design, where we say, okay, I know from this point on Isabelle is in that mission, so I will have to adjust things. And this is true for all the characters. Like, Kate is similar. If you have Kate in a mission, level design needs to adjust, because you can always take one guard out of the equation with Kate. You could just talk to the guard and he will look somewhere and then he's gone. And so we need to level design around that. And it's the same with the connectability for Isabelle, where you're like, okay, so you can always connect to people. I need to know that. How do I build the level around that? And that worked rather well I think. We made it work. And the first mission you get her in, I'm sure like people are always afraid that she's too overpowered. I read that a lot in the comments. Like, of course, we read all the comments and we see everything. So we're like, yeah, they are afraid of that. And the first mission you get her, we actually made her very powerful, because we want you to feel like she's very good. So I want to see how that goes. And people are like, I knew it, she's overpowered. But in the next missions, then she's getting more balanced. So
and I've been playing the beta over the last kind of couple of days, and I've sort of been particularly struck by how kind of Hitman like a lot of the levels are. Do you have like they're much bigger maps than in Shadow Tactics. You've got more sort of multiple targets. all on the same map, and you've got kind of civil zones where you can mingle with the NPCs and kind of not get into trouble, and you can even kind of make all of their deaths seem like kind of accidents. You don't have to have like a big shootout. Like, that must have been quite the design challenge, to kind of make sure that players have enough opportunities to kind of find their own solutions. Like, how did it differ from the way that you designed Shadow Tactics?
So it's basically just more. So we were like, okay, we have the same principles. The thing that you mentioned as well, the civil zones, there is something that is of course new, and that again goes into the way where we're saying, if we have a civil zone around an enemy setup, then the player can freely move around and choose the entry point, which is pretty cool because that's what we want. And for Shadow Tactics, it was usually harder because setups had more entry points, but sometimes you had to sneak or get to some points difficultly, and they weren't weighted like the same. But with the civil zone, they are the same. Like, you can go to the front or you can go to the back, and that creates challenges for level design, but also opportunities, I guess. So yeah, we put a lot of effort into making it like that. And as I said before, the setups in general, or the way our game is set up, is that you always have solutions with different skills that you can make. And so we basically have to give away control. So we're like, I'm building this thing and I'm trying to make it as good as possible for these 2 or 3 playthroughs that I plan. Like, I planned for you playing this way or that way, but I know there's going to be 5 other ways to solve that thing. And all I have to make sure is that it doesn't break if you do that. It might be a little harder, it might be a little easier, that's fine. So we approach it that way, and that's why it takes very, very long to get these levels done. Like, they take a year or more. Like, this, and sometimes it looks like nothing changed. You're like, okay, yeah, it's still the same thing. What happened? Like, if you look at the town level that you were mentioning in the vertical slice, and that's years ago, when you first shot the game 2 years ago, it doesn't look much different, but there's a lot of small details, and turning that guard like 1 centimeter to the right so he sees this thing. A lot of that stuff is happening.
Yeah. And kind of one thing that I really love is sort of just how clean and kind of intuitive the interface is. The guarded zones, they clearly kind of, those kind of big red lines kind of come up when you go near them. And you can also, being able to just to see how much noise you're going to make as well, the sort of the clear kind of rings to, that gives the player a lot of kind of tools to kind of work out, like, to devise strategies and come up with kind of ways to tackle the problems. Like, did that take a lot of fine tuning to get right, or did you, were those lessons kind of already learned from making Shadow Tactics?
Both. So it was something that we always, it was our main pillar, one of for Shadow Tactics, is that we are a game of almost perfect information. Like, there are stealth games, and I love those. It's just not don't want to talk bad about them. It's just a different type of stealth game. There are a lot about ambiguity and not knowing, is the guard seeing me? Can I do this? Can I do that? And it creates some sort of tension. Our game is different. We are more tactical than that. So we want you to know what's going to happen if you do something before you do it, so you can plan, and we want you to know what happened after it happened, so you can, if you're quick loading, which you will be doing a lot, you can change and know, okay, maybe I should change this small thing, go 1 meter to the left, and then it works out. So this perfect information, this feedback is very, very important to us. And pushing that even further from Shadow Tactics, there's a lot of subtle things that have changed. Like, now you can, we have indicators when people that are off screen but inside a noise radius can hear you, and you show you that. So on the left, there's someone that might hear you. Small stuff like that. There's just a lot of it, and keeping that clean and never overloading the UI is very, very hard thing. I remember there's some things where we're discussing a lot. Okay, do we need to display this noise radius? And when do we need to display it? Like, is it when you use the skill? Is it when the skill, like, for example, Hector has a trap. He can use the trap, he can lay it somewhere. There's different types of noises going in there. Like, when he lays the trap, he makes noise. When the trap is on the floor and someone steps in, it makes noise. So there's different types of things. And we looking a lot at which of these things do we have to display at which point, so the player has the information they need, and which information do they maybe not need, so we don't clutter everything. Because if you have 5 characters and maybe you're planning some stuff in your planning mode, then there is a lot of UI.
Yeah. And kind of one thing that you have sort of brought over from Shadow Tactics is the ability to kind of to pause the action and kind of issue specific commands to your party to kind of set up simultaneous takedowns. Sort of here, you call it the Showdown Mode, but sort of as the name kind of implies, like, are you hoping that players are going to use this in a slightly different way to how they used it in Shadow Tactics, kind of maybe fight their way out of situations rather than kind of just simply reload their last quick save?
Yes, it's been like the big difference is, which also many people don't really remember, is that in Shadow Tactics it actually didn't pause the game. It
Right.
only made it a little slower, and that was a big criticism that we got from many people who were like,
Right.
who are used to playing like in their own pace more, because it's
Mm.
important to us that the game is real time. That differentiates us from XCOM and the likes, right? We want to
Yep.
be unique, but people also want to have, like, if things get messy, it usually is a lot of stuff happening at the same time, and you're just in Shadow Tactics, you usually just got overwhelmed. Also, you're like
Yeah.
a micro god or something. So we're not for StarCraft players only. So we said, okay, let's put in the pause and see where it takes us. And we were like, the community was right. So
Yeah.
that really that did a lot, and especially for the guns and the combat, as you mentioned. Like, if I'm getting in a bad situation now, I can just pause the game and I can look at what's happening and say, okay, this guy back there, he's seeing me. There's one over there who's starting to aim at me. So okay, I'm going to plan a shot on this guy. I'm going to throw my knife on that guy. Is everything done? Yes, execute, and just pause again. And then you can assess again. And they have come like 2 meters towards you, and you can adjust to that. So you're getting into this very tactical combat loop where you can play the game in a very different way that also works. And that's only possible because of pause. But one big disclaimer, if you're a purist and you don't want any of that new stuff, you can disable it. So that's possible. We have options to disable that in your custom difficulty settings. And if you're playing on hardcore, Desperado difficulty, you don't get to pause the game.
Yeah. And kind of was there anything that you really wanted to include in the game, but you kind of, you just didn't have time, or kind of you just couldn't find a good reason to kind of fit it in?
Oh, there's always a lot of ways. So one thing that I would have loved to try is like adding fog of war in some missions, like playing around with that. We already did that for Shadow Tactics and tested, and then we were like, okay, it has potential, but we are not going to able to pull it off. Like, it would have been too much. And this time around, we have added so much stuff and made it so much bigger, the game. Like, there's so much more stuff that we haven't even talked about yet that is there as content. That we're like, okay, no, like, we can't do that. So this is something I would at some point like to visit, to see what is it like if you explore missions more in that type of setting. So
yeah. And kind of, do you think that kind of once kind of Desperados 3 is kind of finally finished, do you think like there's more to do here in the Wild West? Like, do you think you'll kind of go back?
I think we're like, I don't know what I'm allowed to say, actually. So there might be stuff coming, of course, but what our next big project is, we don't know that yet. So that's not.
I think, like, because obviously kind of jumping from the Edo period Japan to kind of the Wild West, kind of like that is quite a time jump. Like, do you think, like, if you could pick like any setting, to kind of make a real-time tactics game, like what would be your dream setting?
So this is a big discussion in the studio. There's very many different opinions about that. So I can only give my opinion. There's a couple of them. So one thing that I personally would love to do is experiment with something that is not as strictly historical as the settings we have right now, where we have maybe magic, like real magic. In Desperados, there's voodoo, but it's very basic, and it's still tied into the world, and we're not going ham and crazy with magic skills or anything. God forbid, that is not Desperados. But like doing something where we can be a little more creative with skills and try stuff like, just have the presence of some sort of magic. That would be very interesting from a game design perspective for me, to see what we can do there. And another one, which is probably not going to happen because nobody at the studio likes it, but I love Warhammer 40K. So I would, at some point, would love to make a Warhammer game, but I don't think that's going to happen because there's like 2 people in the studio that love Warhammer.
Yeah, I think we've got the closed beta trailer to show. So just hang on 1 second while I set that up. Hopefully this will work. And let's see if this hopefully works. Let's share that.
I cannot hear. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right. I think, yeah, that's probably most of the questions that I have. Thank you so much for joining us, Mo.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
And I think that, and also, a big thank you to everyone watching at home as well. You can find out more about Desperados 3 by visiting Mimimi's website. And please do also check out the EGX Res digital page on Steam as well, where you can wishlist all the games that we've been talking about over the last couple of days, including Desperados 3. So please do go and check that out in a minute. Res Digital will continue at 1 o'clock right here, where you can find out all. I think the next panel is finding out all about how to get into games journalism. So please do stay tuned for that as well. So that's all from us. So thank you again for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Res Digital. Goodbye.
Bye.